to Two Creators and a Microphone, the podcast where we have candid conversations about video, gear, and living the creator lifestyle. I'm Desiree.
And I'm Basil.
And this is episode 1. This is our premiere episode.
Yay!
Yay!
Finally.
We've been talking about this for how many years?
A long time. I think we bought the gear 2017.
Yeah. And now is when we use it.
Yeah, now. All things happen for a reason, so we're going to start now.
Exactly.
So, let's just get right to it, okay? Something that, you and I always talk about, which is gear. Gear.
Yes, we have daily conversations about gear.
And when gear comes out, we have conversations, and then a new gear. So there's been a lot of gear that just recently came out talking about camera gear. And so let's talk a little bit about them. I think we have the Canon R5C that came out. That's on back order. And I want to give prices on these things too. So if people are thinking about purchasing them, and we're not sponsored by any of these manufacturers, we have no ties to none of these companies.
No.
Wink, wink.
But if they would like,
we would be more than happy. We would be more than happy.
Yes, and we would like to try out all of the cameras before they come out.
So the Canon R5C, and I'm going to round it off. It's $4,500. Okay, so big sticker price. It's full frame. It's just like the R5, but more video-centric features for you. Then we came out. So let me just back up a little bit on the Canon. There's not much negative things I could say about the Canon. I used Canon. The color science is awesome. That's why I loved it. I left it for other reasons when they weren't going the 4K route, when I had the 5D Mark III. But this camera, the R5 came out, there were some overheating issues. I think that was resolved with the firmware. Now we have the R5C. A little pricey. Then we have a camera that you like, which is the Sony A7IV, long awaited.
Yes.
And that's something that I do like and admire Sony for. They come up with a camera, they listen to the what people are saying about it, then they come up with another model and they fix all those things. And if there's anything about that, then they tweak it and they fix it. And they do this pretty rapidly. And that camera is about $2,498.
Exactly. Body only.
Body only, of course, yes.
They do have a version that comes with a lens. I forget what the range is. It's about like 28 millimeter to
28 to 70.
28 to 70. That's the one, yeah.
And that is $26.98. So that's an unbelievable price to get yourself started with a camera, full frame, and a lens right off the bat, so you can start working. And then the thing about the A7, which the Canon is as well, those more on the video side, this one is photography orientated, but it still has excellent video capabilities, which I like.
Yes, I like it too. And I actually tested some of the pictures on it, and it's actually pretty good. Definitely, I would say it's better than the A7S III, which of course is not a photo camera. It is more video, but you're supposed to be able to take decent pictures, which is fine. But if you want to print, I would definitely go with the A7IV.
And then we have GH6. Okay, I think that was announced, February 22nd or something?
Yeah.
Okay, a powerhouse, a micro four thirds camera. I'm not going to go through all the specs, 5.7. It's definitely for those who had GH5, GH5 and want to step up the game, GH6. Anybody who may be into cinematography and want all those features that it comes with, may be thinking about this. But it's micro four thirds. One key feature I do like is the time code feature that they put in there. You don't get that in a camera, $2,200. That's what it retails for. You don't usually get that in cinema cameras like that.
All right.
The Micro Four Thirds is debatable, and we could talk about that a lot more later. Then the Olympus OM. They should put a G on the back of that. OMG.
OMG.
So the Olympus came out with theirs, Micro Four Thirds as well, and it's another little powerhouse. But I'm just curious as to see what it's gonna do, because they have come up with a lot of good cameras, and then they just kind of like, left people hanging, and then jumped another one. This one seems to be on par. They actually got the autofocus right, unlike Panasonic with the GH6 still using the contrast. So
Yeah.
that was so I'm interested in seeing what's going to happen there.
I think Panasonic needs to take a lesson from Olympus and some of the other camera brands and just fix that autofocus. I mean,
You
if they
mean
fix that, I would definitely stay with Panasonic. But since I do most of my filming just me in front of the camera, I need a reliable autofocus. And
yeah,
unfortunately, that contrast focusing doesn't work for, especially for YouTubers.
yeah.
Just it's not functional for us.
I agree and disagree. Because I'm a Panasonic fan.
I know you are. And you were the one who told me to get the GH5,
Yeah.
which I did, and it's a great camera. That's the only, to me, that was the only downfall of that camera,
But
was
now
the autofocus.
now check this out. So Olympus actually is using a Sony sensor. So in when they did in defense of Panasonic, when they said they started designing when they had the GH5, they started designing the GH6, and that's why they stuck to contrast, because it was already in the works. I don't know about that, because you see how Sony just pumps these things out one year, and then next year they get a new one, and then next year. So I don't know what's happening. I can't speak on that, but I think if you're going down a road which is not working, and I would rather wait another 2 years to get everything I want for that perfect camera. That reminds me of a YouTuber, perfect camera.
Exactly. But what I do admire about Sony is how they've been listening to people on their on the feedback of their cameras. I remember there were a lot of complaints about the A7S2, and all of those complaints were fixed in the A7S3. So I do like that they were listening to their audience, and especially taking that feedback. I remember hearing about Sony doing a camera camp. This was before COVID, and people who went to that camera camp said Sony specifically asked us, give us all of your feedback on the cameras, what you don't like, what you like. And that was what they pretty much, in addition to like every other YouTuber making videos about what they didn't like about those previous cameras.
Right.
But they took their feedback into consideration, and now we got the A7S3, which a lot of people are jumping ship from other brands to go with the A7S3 because it checks all of those boxes that we're looking for in a video specific camera.
Right. And I've heard that about Sony, that when you say something negative, they don't get defensive about it, but they actually take note of it. So, I mean, that speaks wonders right there. But yeah, we'll see. Now, all these cameras, none of them are out yet. And that always changes once you have them in your hand and you have the production one and you're working with it. Then you tend to be like, oh, well, this actually works, or this really sucks and doesn't work.
Right.
So I can't wait to get one of those in my hands. Talking to any manufacturers out there.
Yes, considering everything is on back order.
I know. But another thing, too. You have Panasonic, you have Canon. When you leave one manufacturer for the other, it's not just the camera body. You got to start thinking of lenses. And we've been in this game for a while. So you start accumulating a bunch of different lenses that are specific to that camera manufacturer. And now you're going to get a new camera and maybe those lenses don't work, and now you have to invest in all new glass again, and that's my hesitation. That's why I don't want to just leave, because I know I'm gonna have to just spend all that money and get more glass. And
Exactly. That's something, yeah, everyone has to consider when making that choice. I mean, if you already have the lenses for that brand, or if you have, like, let's say, like a Metabones adapter that you could just easily convert them to, but still, it's always, to me, it's always better when you use
the native
the
lenses.
native lenses.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just, it always looks better. I mean,
I
that's what
agree.
it's made for.
I agree. I agree with that. There's no arguments here. So
Yeah.
um I have Canon glass, Panasonic glass. I think the bottom line is, when you decide to get a camera and all lenses, I think you have to first look at what is it that you're doing with it. What is your business, or what is it that you're using these cameras for? If you're YouTubing and you're filming yourself, definitely autofocus is a plus. So if you're
Right.
starting out, you may want to consider that, the priority on the list. And then if you're going to be behind the camera, like I'm mostly behind the camera. This is now the first time that I'm in front of the camera. So autofocus meant nothing to me because I was always pulling focus. So it really didn't matter.
Right.
So I think you have to consider that. And then somebody always says the best camera to use is the one that you have. So there you have it.
Exactly. I mean, all the bells and whistles do help, especially if you're filming by yourself. So, like you said, the autofocus, that's what a lot of people are going to look into if they're starting a YouTube channel now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot to think of when you're buying a camera. It's just, a lot of times you just can't jump into, like, oh, unless you got money like that. You're making a lot of decisions, trying to figure out what to do. Like, what can you just change up? Can you change up your entire camera system like that? Or are you going to have two different camera systems and go between both of them and see which one you like better, and then just decide to sell one off? Like, that's what pretty much I've done. I mean, I
Right.
started off with the GH5. Like I said, great camera, but when you're filming yourself, it's not the greatest, especially if you move around or you think you're in focus, and when you look back at it, you're like, oh, I was never in focus the entire video. That's great. Now I got to do it all over again. So I've lived through a lot of those trials and tribulations with non-working autofocus, and that's why I switched to Sony. I mean, I'm using a Sony right now, and I don't have to worry about am I in focus unless I accidentally switched it to manual focus. I mean, but other than that, it's always on autofocus, and I really don't have to worry about it.
Well, I do, because I have a GH5.
Yeah, I remember that, and I showed you how to get the app so you could pull focus
that was
from
amazing.
in front
So,
of the
so
camera.
again, if you have to film yourself, now that's one thing. Panasonic has a great app, and I have the focus puller on there, the wireless one. I think which one I have, the one from Nucleus, tilter, and so I could look at the phone and then do that. And this is another thing that I came from the old school of filmmaking, and nowadays with all these apps, it does make filming a little easier. And I'm all for technology that's going to make my life a little easier. And back in the day, no one would talk about autofocus, but I mean, autofocus is a thing now that we're like, hey man, just autofocus that instead of having a look at it. And I have glasses now, and I have to check everything out to make sure twice, and make sure it's in focus.
Exactly, because
Okay.
you don't want to have to reshoot everything.
No. Okay, a new plug for the GH6 is, while video is working, you can actually check the focus and punch in. How about that?
Look at that.
So I guess they listened.
They listened on that part, but I know everybody has been complaining about the autofocus. But I mean, they are making a lot of improvements with other features. I mean, right now, other than Canon, you can't really go past 4K recording.
Right.
But GH6 now is going to do 5.7.
Right.
Canon, I mean, unless you have the computer to back up, to be able to handle that load.
That file size. Or if you're using one of your favorite manufacturers, who I'm not going to name, but you always use all the time, you could record on that if you want to and get more than 4K.
Yep. Your favorite manufacturer, who I've done videos on their products.
That's your favorite
Tutorials.
manufacturer.
You were the one who got me into it, first of all.
But that could be another topic, because I just felt they dropped the ball. I mean, that's like you buy a brand new car this year, at the end of this year, and then next year they came up with another one with more bells and whistles, but they don't even service your car that you bought, the first car you bought that year. And I feel that's how I feel about your manufacturer. I invested a lot of money with their products. They came up with a new product, and they no longer support. Let me step back. Not support, but they don't. No more upgrades, firmware. It's like nothing. They don't check for that.
Right. And even though now, if you have, let's say, the newer monitor, we'll give you that hint, that, yeah, you can upgrade. All the updates now come with the new bells and whistles, but now they're starting to charge for specific features. Like if you want to record in H.265, you have to pay, I think it's $99 for that capability. I actually bought it, but I bought it on a whimsical sale that they had for, I think, $79. And I said, okay, let me just get it, because now I have cameras that do have that capability. I don't film with it yet, but I figured, well, let me future-proof myself, because I know we're going to get to that in the future. So at least I'll have it, instead of not upgrading and then having to pay probably even more later on down the line. But
so you mentioned future, so let's get into our topic now. Talking about the future. And what's our topic for today?
That is, when is the right time to leave your 9 to 5 for a career in the creative field?
And when you say creative, we're kind of talking about, what we do, but it could actually go into anything creative that you're into, from graphic arts to, an artist, a painter, anything in the art form.
Right.
So that is a great thing. What is a good time, and when is it a good time? So let me first start off with me. So I started off in film when film was film.
when it was actually
35
film.
millimeter film. And that was a hobby, just doing that and using, the Super 16s and making these little films. And then some friends of mine went to film school, and I was assisting them while they were at film school, and I learned it. But I think that transition, I came from an IT background. I was working as a systems engineer, but I think from the time I started film and wanted to do it full time, I think it might have been, maybe I'm thinking 7 to 8 years before I actually transitioned into doing this full time. And so the first thing I would urge anybody to do or think of is learn your craft. Don't just think you could buy all the gear. Even if you have the money, buy all the gear and do it. I think you should learn your craft and know your craft. So in those years of me working with other people, and sometimes I'm working for free because I just want to dive in and I just want to learn everything, and I'm surrounded by all these people on set and I'm learning from them and they're teaching me, and that's how I learned, the School of Hard Knocks for 7 to 8 years before I even started working on my own. And it was in an era where, you can't buy and afford an Arri camera or one of these other cameras, because they were like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Only like studios had them. So you couldn't really make a movie using that kind of gear. And that's why I'm happy now because now you could purchase for a couple of $1,000 or even less than that, gear and start doing something if it's YouTube or whatever it is that you want to start doing. So I think the right time is to, I would say, first learn your craft and know it well. Another key feature is learn the business because a lot of times people just think they can um, buy something and get into it. I could tell you when the droning business started, everybody thought they could buy a drone and make business from it. And a lot of people bought drones and failed because they didn't know the business side of it. And as we get going into this, we'll tap a little bit into the business side, but I'm going to point you guys to some key people on YouTube that actually focus on the business side. And I've seen them and I'm like, these guys, I wish I knew them before I started because it would help you on your journey a lot faster. Um,
Exactly. I mean, you can't just jump into, I mean, nowadays it feels like you could just jump into anything because the technology is there.
yeah,
And you hear a lot of YouTubers when they're doing videos on how to start a YouTube channel, what do you need to start a YouTube channel, and they're just like, oh, just use a phone. And you're like, yeah, I could just use my phone, but if you don't have the proper lighting for it, your video's not going to look great. I
right.
mean, yes, you could with the iPhone nowadays and with the Samsung phones, you could record really good video, but if you don't know how to record it or what to do, your video is just not going to be as great as maybe the other person who studied filming and studied how to properly light a scene and all of the little nuances that go into just making a shot look decent on camera.
Exactly. That's where that skill set comes in. So if you learn that skill set and the regular person didn't, yours should look a lot better because you have some skill set behind that, whether it's a phone or a power shot camera or whatever it is, it should be a lot better. I've used my phone for a lot of things, and I remember just recently I went away for the Christmas holiday, took my gear, and I was at a party with my brother, and he was like, "Hey, why don't we I have an announcement to make." And he's like, "Basil, get your camera out." So I go in the case, I attach the lens, put the battery, turn it on, white balance. By that time, he started to say his announcement. So you know what I had to use? My phone. Because if I had waited for the camera to turn on, I was going to miss the moment because he wasn't waiting on me. He just started making his announcement. So I put my camera down, took the phone out and recorded it and captured that moment on the phone. Now that's just something that, it wasn't a movie or anything, but that's that's the beauty of a phone. It's small, it fits in your pocket, and you could do anything with it. I'm not a person to hit any camera manufacturer or any phone because I have friends that'll be like, "Oh my God, I would never film on a phone." I'm never gonna say that because the phone is something that every year they're tweaking that phone and they're making changes every year. It took the GH5 to the GH6 5 years, and the Canon to go from a DSLR to mirrorless 3 or 4 years. So I am thinking that it won't be long before this phone technology catch up to the cameras. I mean,
Exactly.
that's what it's looking like already,
Well, now you see, you could buy a rig for your phone.
right?
There are microphones specifically that you could connect your phone to. I mean, imagine walking around with an iPhone rig and like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna go and film this scene with the iPhone. So then, one way it's really cool because yeah, you could get probably a just as good shot with the iPhone as you would with any other mirrorless camera. But then it also gives the perception to, let's say, people who don't know video or the film industry. They're like, well, you could just film it on your iPhone. There you go. Why do you need all of this equipment? Well, no, there's a certain professionalism that comes with having a mirrorless camera or a red camera versus, okay, I just pulled out my phone out of my pocket and I'm just gonna film or take your photo. Here's your headshot on
Right.
a on an iPhone.
Well, let's look at this too. Suppose, you're charging a client a lot of money, and then we just show up with iPhones.
Right.
He's going to be like, wait a second, I could have done that.
Right. I didn't need you to
Right.
come with your iPhone. I have one in my pocket, and why am I paying you thousands of dollars
Right.
to do this when I have the same exact equipment?
Exactly. Exactly. Although that's debatable. I could say, well, I have the experience. That's debatable.
Right.
Um, so going back to when to start, what do you need? We talked about having the skill set and developing that skill set. And the next thing I would say is you're going to need the gear and equipment,
Right.
which at this time is a lot less. And there's some instances where for the specific job that I do, I don't have the gear. So I would actually just rent the gear for that job and then build a client for it. However, if you're starting out, you may not have it. So the months or years leading up to you when you're saying you want to actually get into it, you should be accumulating your gear, learning your gear, learning the craft. If it's painting, I'm sure you're going to learn what's the best paint to use. Is oil, acrylic for me. If it's going to be what we do, the camera, lighting, audio, and I can't say it again, audio, and I'll say it one more time, just if you didn't hear it once or twice, audio, because that right then itself is what separates, amateur from the professionals. Having that audio, you have a camera, um, you didn't put a shotgun mic on top. You're using that camera mic from the directly from the camera, and you're standing 5-6 feet away. It's going to be horrible. I believe they may overlook, bad filming, but they will not over listen to the bad audio. They just won't.
Exactly. Bad audio kills a
Yeah.
video, no matter how good it looks.
You can imagine
Yeah.
some Steven Spielberg, some cinematic thing happening, and then the audio is like crap. When the dialogue you can't hear, people would walk out the theater. So they both go hand in hand, and that takes practice. Like anything or any skill set, practice is going to make perfect. And even then, you still may make mistakes. But I think you know maybe putting aside a certain amount, depending on what you're doing, and it's not as though in our industry that you can't get into it. You can get used gear, and you could build your clientele. I have a lot of friends, and even myself, for extra money, we did weddings. And I'm a person that I don't do any weddings. So if you listening to this and you only heard wedding, then listen to what the other thing I'm going to say. I do not do weddings anymore. All right, that was something that I did, and it takes a special person to do weddings, and I appreciate doing those weddings because it made me a better videographer. I would set up much more quickly than others after doing it for 2 years, and we're talking like I'm doing 30 to 36 weddings a year for 2.5 years. I notice all my friends who have done weddings, they're so much better on set in preparation and getting set up and going. So I digress a little bit on the weddings because I'm not doing anymore. But
No weddings for Basil.
but yeah, so you could start off by charging for while you're in that transitional stage. If you work a 9 to 5, maybe in a week, then because weddings happen on weekends, and you could be doing an occasional wedding, learning that craft, and I would say do a free wedding, and be careful when I said free, and don't be coming back at me on that one, because weddings are not easy. I would say go and work alongside somebody, be like a second shooter, and see if somebody would hire you, and do that.
I would also say events not weddings, but let's say festivals,
Oh
where
yeah.
you could go on a weekend and just capture your own footage, kind of do your own sizzle reel of that event. Not only are you getting footage, you're practicing, but you're also building your reel, which you will need to
Yep.
then show future clients what you've done and what you can do. And then from there, you can see how well you did. And if there were things that you didn't like about it, well, now you know how to fix it for the future. And you're going to learn by watching your own footage and be like, oh, I could have done this better, or I didn't like that. I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
So definitely, if you don't want to do weddings like Basil, you could you could definitely look for an event. There's constantly festivals going on. There's also just, even if it's like your family party,
Right.
just to get that practice, because you're going to need to film and film and film and continue to film to get that practice, to get comfortable with using your camera. Because the only way you're going to really know your camera is if you film with it and just using it over and over again.
Yeah. And just like a painter who uses all these various brushes and different, canvases, it's the same with us. We have to use, we know use different lenses and use that in our practice. Now, you touch on a really good point with the events, because I kind of forgot about that. Since COVID happened, there weren't any events, but now
Right.
events are starting to rack up, and sometimes you can actually go to an event, maybe talk to the event supervisor and says, listen, if I put together a video, would you guys be interested in that? And they might not have thought about it until you present it to them, shoot it, and maybe you could either give it them for free, or you could either say, hey, how about giving a donation um, for this
And you could
particular
also
video piece.
you could also try to get free admission to the event when you go to them ahead of time and
Right.
give them that proposition of, hey, I could do a video of the event that you can use for next year's, to promote next year's event,
Right.
or to use it on social media when you want to have content for the rest of the year until the next one.
And see,
So
that's another thing you mentioned, social media. Those videos can be short and quick, and let's face it, social media is here, and that's where the video is going to go.
exactly. And nowadays, with reels or shorts or whatever platform you want to you're using, TikTok, it's all short form videos. So if you film a lot in one event, you have massive amounts of footage, because social media, you either have 30, 60 seconds to get that video out.
Right.
It's just that total of 30 seconds. You could do a lot in 30 seconds nowadays with footage. But once you have all of that footage, it just amounts to so much more when you translate it into social media video.
Yeah. When you said all that footage, I just remembered as I used to film, you're running through that film, and the director would be like, hey, you got it already. Why are you still filming? Oh, I just want to try this angle. And he goes, no, it's costing us money on that film. Now we don't have film like that, so we have it on a digital media. But a lot of times when I hire, younger videographers, and I shouldn't say younger, beginning videographers, and I ask them just to shoot an event, they would come back with like 40 or 50 gigs of footage. And I'm like,
Wow.
I gotta look through all of this footage and try to pick out, something for a 30-second spot. So, quick tip, just try to catch the important things, and you don't have to go overboard with so much footage.
And when you're a beginner, you don't know that. So you think you need to film more
Right.
because you need to overcompensate for something. And it's like, no, you just need to get what you need to get for that scene or for that usage and go. You don't
Right.
need to be there all day, because
Right.
then, yeah, you'll learn, especially if you notice, oh, I filmed 8 hours of footage. Oh, now I got to go watch and,
Right.
go through all that 8 hours of footage. Then you're going to learn, maybe next time I won't film 8 hours. Maybe I'll just film
A
an
few
hour,
minutes, right?
an
Well,
hour total of everything, and just here, okay, now we just need a few seconds of this shot and move on to the next thing.
so how about this? That same guy, I I I made the video, and then I turned around. I said, "Hey, do you mind making the 30-second highlight reel, please?" And he was like, "Wow, I'll do it." And he goes, "Okay." And it was like 3 or 4 days went by, and then he called me, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm still working on it because there's so much footage." And I was like, "That's exactly why I wanted you to edit it, because you had too much footage." And then the second time he went out, he only gave me exactly what I wanted. He could have actually given me more footage, but what he gave me was on point, and it was a learning key. And you don't know that until you start learning it. So that comes with experience. Another thing I want to bring up too is when we're looking at a hobby, trying to go into something that's in the art, how bad do you really want it? How much do you really want to make that change? I hear a lot of people, well, I have a wife, I just have a new baby, and I want to be a videographer. I've been doing it for 5 years, and he had experience, and I just don't know how to transition into that. And he's was making decent money, and I just said, well, how bad do you really want to do it? You're making a lot of money now. Why don't you put some aside so that when you go into this, you're giving yourself 6 to 8 months. You should always have, like, 6 months of savings that you can go on without anything if you're not made one dime. He did that, and he actually went in full-time videography in the beginning of this year, and he's been working with a lot of my friends in the industry, and he's doing good. And then there's been some other people I know who maybe 10 years now, I want to do this, I want to do this, but they went out and they bought the camera gear, and they bought whatever was booming, or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and they haven't shot anything with it, and it's just sitting in a bag. And I'm just gonna wait until he's ready to give it up, and I can say, I'll buy that from you. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So yeah, but you have to want it, and you have to like crave it. And I understand for those, if you're single, you got no excuse. So I'm not even talking to a single person. If you're single, no excuse. But
Right.
for the person who has a family, I understand how that's gonna go. And like I said, you just have to ease into it, but you have to want it. I mean, I think when I do a lot of editing, and I do a lot of filming, but lately I've been doing more editing than filming because of COVID. But I could tell you, when I don't pick up my camera, I get this urge. I'll just go outside and film the birds. I don't care. I just need to get behind the camera and film something. And
Right.
so it's, how bad do you want it? If you're a painter and you want to paint something, and you have all the brush and you have the canvas, but you don't paint, I mean, then that's on you. How badly do you really want to paint something?
Exactly. Because, I mean, that's the only way you're going to get better at it is when you do it. So if you notice, like, hey, I'm pretty good at this, should I jump in? Because, yeah, everybody sees the glamour, I guess, the glamour side of it. It's like, oh, well, if I'm, my own boss, I don't have to report to anyone, which in essence you still do, because you're reporting to your client. You're not reporting maybe to a direct supervisor, but your client's the one that's going to determine if you get paid or not, and if you did a good job that they want to hire you for for their next project. So
Yeah.
it's a lot to think of. I say definitely plan, but also keep in mind why you want to do it. Is it because you're trying to get away from your job that you hate in corporate America? And you think, oh, well, if I can make videos all day, that'll be the life. Which, no, it's not, because there's a lot of work, especially if you're doing it by yourself. There's
Right.
only you to depend on. You're the only one that's has to bring in the business, but then you also have to do the work and keep the client happy. It all falls on you. So it's like, not
Yeah.
only is it going to fall on you, do you have enough maybe to hire somebody
Right.
else to help you? Do you have someone in your family that can help you in the beginning, because you're gonna get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's
So
gonna be just, you're gonna realize, wow, everything falls on me now, and
yeah.
you don't have that stable check coming in,
No.
because it's gonna be depending on how fast you did the job, and then how
Right.
fast the client decides they're gonna take to pay you, because you can do the job fast, but the client sometimes won't pay you
30
right
days.
away. 30 days. Oh, and then if you work for, do work for a company, they tell you, oh no, it's net 30 days. We don't
Right.
care if you did it in 2 days, the work, and got it back to us. We're going to take our sweet time to pay you, because we have our policies that we're going to follow. So it's like, wow, are you going to be able to survive without a potential check
Right.
until 30 days from now, or even that's if they pay in 30 days.
Right.
Sometimes they don't.
Oh
Sometimes
yeah. Well,
they take longer.
I have some nightmare
Months.
stories which I'm going to tell you all later. 6 to 7 months, okay, on a particular client. But anyway,
Yeah.
so I like how you said the thing about work, because a lot of times, people look at. I'll just use up the YouTubers. Oh, those guys make so much money. Those guys work a lot. Okay.
Hmm.
When you are your own boss, especially as a YouTuber, but I mean, you're doing everything. Social media, you're doing lighting, you're doing everything. And at the same time, you're looking for new work. And that's what we do as freelancers. We're looking for the next client. How do you get new clients? That first piece of work that you submitted, maybe somebody else sees it and it's word of mouth. Then you have to use social media, show that work, push that work out. But the key is always to have good work, because it's undeniable when you see someone's work. I cannot tell you how many times they saw something and go, well, who did that? Or who filmed that? Or where'd that come from? And then you want to hire that person.
Right.
And I've gotten hired a lot of times just because of the work. But as a freelancer, you talk about finishing the work quickly. We want to get that work done, because a lot of times you don't get paid until the work is done.
Right.
So we're quick to spin that work up, finish it, and get it out and on to the next job. Because sometimes you have 5 or 6 projects coming in at the same time, that you need to balance between, when they're going to go out. And a lot of times I ask my clients, when is the deadline on this? And if they've been working in the corporate world, they tend to say, oh, 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm like, oh, I think I could do that in a week. But really, I could do that like the next day. But I'm not going to tell them that. So some pointers are to just organize your time from filming to editing. And a lot of times people in our back in the day, you had a job, DP, director. That was your job, and you never changed lanes. If you're a producer, production assistant, whatever it is, that was your job. But nowadays, I think it has turned into almost this one man band thing. You have to
Right.
learn almost everything. And recently somebody was saying, yeah, jack of all trades, master of none. You've heard that saying.
Yeah.
But there's more to that saying that nobody actually talks about. It says jack of all trades, master of none, but still better than master of one. so So yeah, you talk about work, Desiree, and a lot of people look at YouTubers and they're like, "Hey, I could do that. I could pick up a camera and film all that stuff," but they don't realize that it takes a lot of work. These guys are actually creating new content, thinking about what content they're going to create the next week and the week after, because now this is a job, so you better love it. And then the editing of it, and then they're doing video, they're doing audio, and whatever else comes with that, which is everything. Then they're doing social media to push it, advertisement. So it is a lot of work. And I've seen a lot of people who say they want to be a YouTuber and they do 1 or 2 videos and then they're like, that's it. It's just a lot of work. They can't deal with it. And it's no
Exactly.
different than if you're a freelancer like you and I, that we have work coming in and we have more clients to deal with, and we're talking with client A, and then we have client B with a new project, and client C with with maybe a new project, and then we have client D that's inquiring about, oh, you have all these different gamuts of the business, and we don't have enough time to really go into that in terms of the business and dealing with it. But I would hope that as you get into this, as a creative, as you get into it, that we can help you with that. Because I mean, I wish I had somebody. I wish YouTube was around, because there's so many times I go
Yeah.
on YouTube, and some people are really talented and they give you really useful, great information, even on editing and filming tips, and some people don't. And about gear, you have a great channel talking about gear, and that's been so useful about what you do. And even with the editing, I thought I was the bomb diggity on editing until you gave me that tip, and I was like, okay, I'll take it. So that's another key, is
Right.
always be striving to learn, because you don't know it all. You think you may, but you don't.
Exactly. I mean, you can never stop learning. There's always something new coming out that you don't know of. And especially that within our line of work, there's so many little intricates, like based on, like, for editing. You know how many features are in a editing software?
Yeah.
There's things that nobody knows that they're in there. But then you see a YouTube video and you're like, "Oh, I didn't know that you could do that in this software," and that, it was there. And then,
Right.
it's like finding all of those little things that you didn't even know that existed, that actually is going to make you a better creator and is going to help you do things faster and smarter. It's
Right.
just like, you definitely, I mean, whatever it is, I always look for a tutorial, something like that. And then whenever I learn it, I try to teach it to someone else, because someone else could always benefit from that.
Right.
I mean, there are people in this industry that have been in the industry for years, and you're like, and it's funny because like, for instance, me, I haven't been as part of the industry as long as you have, but when I teach you something, it's like, oh, I thought you would have known that already, because you know a lot of things about the industry and about editing and filming and all
You
this stuff.
don't
So
know
it's
it
like,
all.
it's funny, when it's like, oh, if I could teach you something, then okay,
You
you
can teach
know,
someone else. So
you can
yeah.
teach someone else. So it doesn't matter how long you've known how to edit or how long you've been shooting. There's always something to learn.
Yeah, yeah, I agree totally. I can't tell you, even in everything from filming to editing. I've seen somebody do something like, oh, I didn't even know that was on that camera, and I've been using that for a year now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So as we go and wrap this up, um, some other questions are, if you're gonna start, should you get a corporation right away? Should you get a website? Should you get social media? All these different things. Should I get insurance to cover my gear? All of the above, but in order of there's an order, I think, in my mind of how it should be done, and it's how I've done it. The first thing I do is, if I'm just as a hobby, I'm not thinking about a business, because I'm working a 9 to 5. This is a hobby. I'm not really making a lot of money in the beginning from what I'm doing. So I'm not focused on getting a business. But the minute I turn the curve that I'm going to leave this 9 to 5 and do this, you should get an LLC or some sort of corporation. And then it's going to protect you, and it's going to look more professional when you present your work to a client on an invoice or an estimate that has the corporate name on it. And then I would also get an email that reflects that company name. So no Gmail here, Basil Desiree at Gmail. No, we're gonna get the corporation, whatever that name is. Get that. That should be the two things you should focus on, and then have a little fund for, social media advertisement. And if you don't know that, then I guess you're gonna keep watching, because Desiree is a master at that, and she can give you some pointers on that. But definitely use social media now, to your advantage. I came from the old school, and I'm like, I'm not gonna be dealing with that social. But hey, it's here. Use it. Use any tool that can help you draw business or show your work. Look at it like a canvas, and this is all the different facets on the canvas, so anybody can see. And then later, as you start to get more gear and accumulate more gear, yes, you need to get insurance. You go on a job site, you go for lunch, which I never do after with my gear in the car, and you come
No.
back and your gear is not in your car. And you call your insurance company and they're like, I'm not covering $20,000 worth of gear that was in your car. Your car
Right.
doesn't even cost $20,000. So later on, you want to get insurance, and there's some great insurance apps that they have now that'll just cover you for a particular gig. So if you didn't want to cover insurance for the year, but actually, let me backtrack on that. It's actually affordable to get $10,000 to $12,000 in coverage for your gear, and it's like a couple $100 for the year.
And
We
sometimes it's required for when you work with certain companies that you have to show proof of insurance. Even if you're not doing, let's say, anything on their premises, they still want some type of proof that you are insured and that
Yeah,
if anything happens, like God forbid, camera falls on somebody
right,
or yeah, it gets stolen, you're covered, because also it makes you look more professional as well, because
exactly.
companies are going to want to work with someone who is professional and has all of their ducks in a row. And if they're like, oh well, you didn't have any insurance, well, now
Yeah,
you're going to be out a lot of money and a lot of gear depending on the circumstances.
and like I was saying, there's some insurance companies, like I know for like the drone coverage, they wanted like $2 or $3 million, and there's a one or two apps that I use that will cover you for that specific job. So if you have the job tomorrow, you can have coverage for 24 hours for that day up to that amount that you need. So if anything happened, you can present that, and that's good to have. So I think we covered a little bit and we tapped into it, but I think you should always draw into your passion, because I've been doing this and I've gone through a couple job changes. As an engineer, I started off in architecture, then to engineering, and then to this. And people always say, well, when you going to retire and stuff like that. I hear people all the time at 9 to 5 when they can't wait to retire. Well, I don't even think of retiring because it's something that I love to do and I enjoy it. And so if you could find something that you like, it's really not work at that point.
Exactly. And also, when you work for yourself, you're working more than 8 hours a day that you would normally for a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
You're working nights, you're working weekends, it's like you're just nonstop. So if you don't mind that, especially if it's for yourself and it's something you love to do, then it doesn't seem as tedious as like a 9 to 5. Like, oh, now I gotta go to the office, I have to
Right.
do
Right.
my 8 hours there, then go home. And it's just like, true, it's never the same because it's never the same thing over and over again. Sometimes you'll have a shoot, sometimes you're like, no, you know what, let me go film some b-roll
Right.
that I could use for something else.
And that's another way of making income. Just getting B-roll. There's so many places out there that you could sell your footage to. You could do that as well.
Yep.
We'll probably be touching on the business aspect of it every time we talk, just because we're in the business. So
Exactly.
we can't help about talking about that, especially those people who don't want to pay and they just want to suck your ideas out your head. Be aware of those vampires. So we got an episode on that too.
Yeah, definitely. We're covering all of the little things that you need to know when you work as a freelance creative. So definitely the vampires are one. We'll get into more details on that one because it's a doozy.
Yeah.
Well, definitely follow us on our socials. We have two creators and a microphone. We are on Instagram and TikTok, which
Yay.
that's another an, an episode all on its own.
Right.
But then we have our own individual Instagrams. I'm at Desiree Rodriguez on Instagram and on TikTok, which I'm still working on TikTok. But I also have a YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/Desiree Rodriguez. And Basil has his own as well.
whenever I decide to put content up.
Yes. So we technically all have multiple outlets, but those I would say are our main ones. So the podcast has its own, and we have our own individual accounts as well.
Right.
So you can follow us there. If anything, we'll put our handles, if you're watching this, down in the description below on YouTube, and on the podcast, if you're listening to this, we will have it in the show notes, which I
Right.
don't know if Basil knows we're going to have.
Well, it's been nice talking to you always, Desiree. And I know some other things are coming out. Oh, yeah. Some audio stuff will come out. Oh, okay. So we're going to wrap this up. And as my friend Courtney always say, he's going to see you in the next one.
See you guys.